It happened during a circuit overseer's visit in South Africa. The public meetings had their usual talks, encouragement, and reminders. But according to one man who says he was inside the congregation, something very different was said when the doors closed and the circuit overseer met privately with the elders and ministerial servants. This was not presented to the entire congregation, it was not announced from the platform, and it was not included in a public video. Instead, the circuit overseer allegedly revealed a number that exposed just how deeply the pandemic had affected the organization in South Africa. But the number was only part of the story. According to this insider, the circuit overseer became angry, raised his voice, and blamed local brothers for failing to stop what he described as an exodus. At one point, he allegedly told them, "If you can't do the job, get out." Was this simply an emotional circuit overseer speaking under pressure? Was it a warning coming from higher levels of the organization? And do Watchtower's own published reports support the claim that thousands of publishers had quietly disappeared? In this video, we will examine the original account, compare it with the official numbers, and look at what reportedly happened inside that closed-door meeting. Before we continue, if you value careful investigations into what is happening behind the public image of the Watchtower organization, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. It helps this information reach more current and former Jehovah's Witnesses. Because when we examine the numbers, one detail becomes almost impossible to ignore. Part 1. The Closed-Door Warning. The original account appeared online in late 2023. The person who posted it described himself as a PMO ministerial servant, serving in an English-language congregation in Johannesburg, South Africa, close to the local Bethel facilities. PMO is a term commonly used for someone who is physically inside the organization, but mentally no longer believes. That is important because the writer claimed he still had access to meetings that ordinary publishers would never attend. His identity was not publicly confirmed, and the account has since been deleted. Therefore, everything he described must be treated as an anonymous allegation, not as an officially verified Watchtower announcement. But what he claimed is extremely specific. According to the writer, the circuit overseer visited their congregation in June 2023. During the private meeting with elders and ministerial servants, the overseer supposedly let them in on what the writer called a little secret. Approximately 7,000 publishers in South Africa, he allegedly said, had gone cold since the pandemic. The circuit overseer reportedly described these people as wanting nothing more to do with the organization. Think about the weight of that statement. He was not merely talking about publishers who had missed one or two meetings. According to the account, he was describing thousands of individuals who had become so disconnected that they no longer wanted organizational involvement. But then the meeting reportedly took an even darker turn. The writer claimed that the circuit overseer shouted at the brothers because they were not doing enough to stop people from leaving. Elders and ministerial servants allegedly tried to explain that they were dealing with work, family responsibilities, emotional exhaustion, and their own personal problems. The response they received was not sympathy. "If you can't do the job, get out." According to the writer, some of the brothers left the meeting completely deflated. After the visit, a few reportedly attended meetings only when they had an assignment. If the purpose of the meeting was to motivate these men, it may have produced the opposite result. And this is where the account becomes especially revealing. The circuit overseer was reportedly worried that publishers were refusing to return to the midweek meeting because they could still attend through Zoom. Some had apparently told him directly that as long as Zoom remained available, they would not return physically. For decades, Jehovah's Witnesses were taught that attending meetings in person was essential. Missing meetings could quickly lead to questions about a person's spirituality. Elders were expected to notice absence, offer counsel, and encourage the individual to return. Then the pandemic interrupted that system. For the first time, millions of witnesses experienced religious life without traveling to a kingdom hall several times every week. They could attend from home. They could turn off the camera. They could listen without preparing formal clothes, arranging transportation, or reorganizing an entire evening around the meeting. Some discovered that the constant routine had been exhausting them for years. Once they experienced life outside that routine, getting them back inside the Kingdom Hall was much more difficult than the organization may have expected. The most important question, however, is whether the number of 7,000 publishers has any factual support. Surprisingly, Watchtower's own reports provide an important clue. Part 2. What the official numbers reveal. In 2019, immediately before the pandemic, the organization reported an average of 103,430 publishers in South Africa. By 2020, that average had fallen to 97,192. That was a decrease of more than 5,500 average publishers in only one service year. The official report recorded it as a 5% decline. The average fell again in 2021, reaching 96,839. In 2022, it declined slightly further to 96,385. Now compare 2019 with 2022. The difference is exactly 7,045 average publishers. That does not prove that the anonymous writer was telling the truth. It does not prove that the circuit overseer used those exact words. But it means the central number in the account was remarkably close to what anyone could calculate from Watchtower's own reports. Before the pandemic, South Africa had an average of 103,430 publishers. By 2022, that number had fallen to 96,385. That represents a decline of 7,045 publishers. So when the anonymous ministerial servant claimed that a circuit overseer had spoken about approximately 7,000 publishers going cold, the claim was not invented from numbers that had no connection to reality. It closely reflected the documented decline. There is, however, another part of the account that requires caution. The writer claimed that South Africa's publisher numbers had fallen to levels last seen around 2002. The publicly available statistics do not clearly support that comparison. We should not repeat it as an established fact. We also need to acknowledge what happened after the alleged meeting. The 2023 report showed a partial recovery, with an average of 98,175 publishers. In 2024, the organization reported 100,889. And in 2025, it reported an average of 105,117 publishers in South Africa. On paper, that means the average publisher count eventually rose above its pre-pandemic 2019 level. Therefore, it would be misleading to claim that South Africa is currently losing 7,000 publishers every year, or that the official numbers show an uninterrupted collapse. They do not. But the recovery does not erase what happened between 2019 and 2022. Nor does it tell us whether the same people returned. Thousands could have become inactive while new publishers were baptized, former publishers were reactivated, or reporting procedures made it easier for marginally active individuals to continue being counted. A national total cannot reveal the personal stories behind it. Another number deserves attention. In 2019, South Africa had 2,056 congregations. By 2025, that number had fallen to 1,125. That is 131 fewer congregations, even though the reported average number of publishers eventually increased. There may be several explanations for that decline. Congregations can be merged or reorganized for administrative, geographic, financial, or practical reasons. The number alone does not prove a secret mass exodus. But it does show that the organizational structure in South Africa became more consolidated during this period. There is also a major reporting change that makes recent comparisons more complicated. Beginning in November 2023, ordinary publishers were no longer required to report all the details of their ministry activity as they had done before. For most publishers, the monthly report became far simpler. That change may have reduced the pressure associated with reporting and made it easier for some people to remain classified as active publishers. It is reasonable to consider that possibility, although it cannot explain every increase and does not prove that the published totals are false. The 2024 and 2025 growth may reflect genuine baptisms, reactivation, and increased participation. But the way activity is recorded changed, which means we should be cautious when comparing the post-change numbers directly with earlier years. And this brings us back to the alleged closed-door meeting. If the official reports already revealed a decline of approximately 7,000 average publishers, what exactly was secret? Perhaps the secret was not the raw number. Perhaps it was what local leadership believed was happening behind it. The public report showed a percentage and a total. The circuit overseer allegedly described people who wanted nothing more to do with the organization. He reportedly spoke about an exodus, resistance to returning in person, and the failure of elders to bring people back. A statistical report can show that a number declined. A private meeting can reveal the fear, frustration, and anger that the decline produced inside the leadership structure. Part 3. Why the pandemic changed everything. For many Jehovah's Witnesses, the pandemic created something they had rarely experienced before. Distance. Distance from the Kingdom Hall. Distance from elders watching their attendance. Distance from field service arrangements. Distance from the constant expectation to prepare, participate, report, volunteer, and remain visibly active. That distance gave some people time to think. People who had spent their entire lives moving from one organizational activity to another suddenly found themselves at home. Some began researching the organization's history. Others noticed that their anxiety decreased when they were no longer physically present at every meeting. Some realized that what they had called spiritual weakness might actually have been exhaustion. Others discovered that their relationship with God did not disappear simply because they were not sitting inside a kingdom hall. For an organization built around regular participation, this created a serious problem. Returning to physical meetings was not only about reopening buildings. It required convincing people to surrender a freedom they had already experienced. According to the anonymous account, some publishers openly told the circuit overseer that they would not attend the midweek meeting in person while Zoom remained an option. That response may sound insignificant to an outsider. But within Jehovah's Witness culture, directly resisting a circuit overseer's expectation can be a major act of independence. These publishers were no longer quietly accepting every instruction. They had discovered an alternative and were refusing to give it up. The circuit overseer's alleged anger may also reveal the pressure moving down the organizational chain. Branch offices expect results from circuit overseers. Circuit overseers place responsibility on elders. Elders place pressure on ministerial servants and publishers. When participation declines, every level may feel pressure to explain what went wrong. But instead of asking why people were exhausted, why they preferred Zoom, or why thousands had become inactive, the alleged response was to demand that local brothers work harder. Imagine being an elder with a full-time job, a wife, children, financial problems, and personal health concerns. You are already preparing talks, attending meetings, participating in field service, handling congregation problems, and offering pastoral visits without receiving a salary. Then a circuit overseer allegedly shouts that you are not doing enough. And when you explain that you are struggling, he tells you to get out if you cannot do the job. How many men could hear that and begin questioning why they were sacrificing so much? The writer said he challenged the circuit overseer's behavior. He reportedly told him that he was being inconsiderate and failing to understand the brother's circumstances. According to the account, that confrontation resulted in the elders visiting the writer afterward. Again, we cannot independently confirm that conversation. But many former elders and ministerial servants will recognize the broader pattern. Questioning how authority is exercised can quickly make the person raising the concern become the problem. Instead of examining whether the criticism is justified, attention turns toward the one who dared to speak. That is why this story resonated with so many former witnesses. It was not only about 7,000 inactive publishers in one country. It reflected a much larger experience. Exhausted volunteers being pressured to repair problems they did not create, while having very little power to question the decisions coming from above. So, was a secret deliberately hidden from ordinary publishers? We cannot prove that. There is no secret recording of the meeting, no leaked Watchtower document, and no confirmed instruction ordering the brothers to remain silent. What exists is an anonymous account from someone who claimed to be inside the room. But Watchtower's own reports show that between 2019 and 2022, South Africa lost 7,045 average publishers, almost exactly the number mentioned in that account. The official totals later recovered, particularly after the reporting system changed. Yet the period of decline was real, and the number of congregations remained significantly lower than it had been before the pandemic. Perhaps the most disturbing part of the story is not that thousands became inactive. It is the alleged reaction when local brothers could not bring them back. Not concern, not curiosity, not a serious attempt to understand why people were walking away. According to the insider, the response was anger, pressure, and one brutal warning: if you can't do the job, get out. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever attended a private meeting where a circuit overseer discussed declining attendance or inactive publishers? Were elders pressured to force people back into the Kingdom Hall after the pandemic? Share your experience in the comments, but please protect your identity and avoid revealing personal information. And if you want more investigations into the stories discussed behind closed doors, subscribe to the channel.